Over the last 4 videos, we've learned quite a few things about mutual funds. Let me quickly summarize before we proceed further. We discussed why it's important to get started on the investment journey, even if it means you start with small amounts. Time plays a crucial role. We discussed all the math involved in personal finance and discussed concepts of absolute return, CAGR, XIRR, and we also discussed concepts on time value of money. We also spoke about the structure of a mutual fund, and in the last video, we discussed the concept of net asset value of a mutual fund. And in this video, we'll continue the discussion and discuss a very important document called the fact sheet of a mutual fund. Kotak has many different mutual fund schemes. I've picked the small cap fund again for no particular reason. So please don't consider this as a recommendation of any sort. You can download the fact sheet of any mutual fund that you wish to understand by going to their website. The first thing to note in the fact sheet is the introductory page where the AMC gives you information about the fund. The introductory page also has the stated objective of the fund. The AMC here states the objective as Kotak Small Cap Fund generates capital appreciation from a diversified portfolio of equity and equity-related securities by investing predominantly in small market capitalization companies across sectors. From the stated objective, we can infer a few things. The fund manager intends to have a diversified portfolio, therefore it is not focused on a particular sector. Investments are in equity and equity-related securities. Investments are predominantly in small market capitalization stocks. Continuing in the fact sheet, the AMC then discusses how they intend to do their research while picking stocks in the small cap sector. Frankly, this should not be of concern to you. I mean, think about this. If you really knew how to pick stocks and research stocks, then you may as well invest in stocks directly and not really via a mutual fund. So don't spend time thinking about how the fund manager does his job on researching stocks. The next section of the fact sheet gives you some information on the fund itself. I think this is a good time to introduce some of the mutual fund jargons to you. The first thing to note here is something called as a benchmark. A benchmark is essentially an index. A mutual fund scheme should benchmark itself to an index to evaluate its performance. We will talk about benchmarking in detail later in this video series. Next up is the fund type. The fund sheet says Kotak Small Cap is an open-ended equity growth scheme. There are 3 critical parameters here, and let's understand all 3. Open-ended. So when a AMC starts a mutual fund scheme, they have 2 options. Either they can let the fund run forever, or they can assign a date on which the fund will cease to exist. If the fund ceases to exist on a predetermined date, then that fund is called a close-ended fund. Next up is equity. By specifying equity, the fund is trying to tell us that this is an equity-oriented fund and all the investments are in stocks. There are other asset classes like debt. Debt funds usually invest in government and corporate bonds. More on this later in the video series. Next up is growth. Growth here indicates that the primary source of wealth creation is through capital appreciation in stock and not through other sources like dividends. Apart from these things, the fund's fact sheet also gives you information about the fund manager. I think a quick look at who the fund manager is and the fund manager's background is good to know. After all, the fund manager is responsible for managing your hard-earned money. But don't spend too much time on this. Next up is allotment date. Basically, this gives you a sense of how old the fund is. Older the fund, better it is as it gives you more data points to analyze. Next up is plans and options. And with this, we get to learn a few more mutual fund jargons. Any mutual funds are offered in 2 different plans, regular and direct. Regular includes commissions paid to a mutual fund distributor, and in a direct plan, there are no commissions paid to a distributor as there are no distributors. We will talk more about these plans when we take up the topic of total expense ratios. Apart from these 2 things, there are other things that you need to pay attention to while reading a fund fact sheet. Dividend payout. This is an option you should consider if you wish to take dividends regularly from the mutual funds you've invested in. However, if you're looking at long-term wealth creation, this is not a good option for you. Growth plan. In a growth plan, there are no dividends that are paid out. The concept of compounding works really well in a growth plan. If you are in for long-term wealth creation, then growth plan is something that you should consider. Personally, all my investments in mutual funds are in growth plans. Entry load. This is no longer applicable, but years ago when you wished to invest in mutual funds, then you had to pay a fee to get your money managed. Now, for compliance reasons, mutual funds explicitly have to state that the entry load is nil. Exit load. This is the amount of money you will have to pay at the time of withdrawal. As you can see, there is a 1% exit load if you wish to withdraw your funds before you complete 1 year. After your investment completes 1 year, there is no exit load applicable. So in summary, the fund fact sheet gives you all the information that you need to understand before you choose to invest in the fund. But do remember, the fund fact sheet is also a marketing document for the mutual fund. So don't get carried away with all the nice things the mutual fund has to say about its fund. Now, before I end this video, let me give you a quick overview of all the different types of mutual funds that are available for you to invest in. There are 5 broad categories of mutual funds and several subcategories within these 5 categories. Note, the word subcategories doesn't really exist in the mutual fund world, but it makes life easy if you think about it this way: categories and subcategories. Back in 2017, SEBI released a landmark circular which cleaned up the categorization in mutual funds. Pre-2017, AMCs would run multiple schemes with overlapping investment objectives. For example, an AMC would run a large cap fund, but under the hood it would pack small cap stocks to boost return. Now, doing that not only impacts the return but would adversely affect the risk of the fund as well. Imagine, as a layman investor, you would invest in a large cap fund assuming the volatility is low, but the presence of small cap stocks would give it a different flavor altogether. Clearly, this was mis-selling of a fund. AMCs running multiple funds with similar objective, lack of definition in the funds, skewed portfolio composition was across the board and across different schemes. SEBI took note of this issue and issued a circular in October 2017. The circular cleaned up this mess. In the circular, SEBI clearly stated how stocks should be classified as large cap, mid cap, and small cap. Apart from these things in the circular, SEBI also clearly stated that a AMC can only run one fund in any given category with no overlapping investment objectives. In fact, SEBI took a step further and also defined the portfolio composition. For example, if an AMC claims to run a large cap fund, then X percentage of the portfolio should be invested in large cap stocks only. With this circular, a lot of things were formally defined by SEBI and AMCs got their act together. Eventually, the investors benefited from this. Anyway, as of today, here is how the mutual fund world looks like. The 5 broad categories are equity, debt, hybrid, solution-oriented, and others. There are roughly about 45 AMCs such as Kotak, Axis, SBI, HDFC, Parag Parikh, etc. All of them run nearly 1,500 odd schemes in India. There are several subcategories within each category of mutual fund. For example, equity as a broad category has subcategories like large cap funds, mid cap funds, small cap funds, large and mid cap funds, etc. Debt fund as a category has money market funds, short duration funds, overnight funds, liquid funds, etc. So is it important for you to know all the subcategories of funds? I don't think so. You only need to understand a handful of categories and subcategories to help you fulfill most of your financial goals. Of course, you need to pick funds that suit both your financial goal and your risk appetite. And that's the objective of this video series. I hope you found this video useful. I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay tuned.